Thank you, Ming, very much for that very, very generous and lovely introduction. It's great to be here. It's great to see faces that I've known for a very long time, Mike and Bob and Craig and everybody. And I know I laughingly said to Craig before, what happened? We used to be the young guys. Well, we're the old guys now, so here we are. I think one of the things that I've always tried to figure out, I think when I started teaching, was what actually was I trying to teach. And I, in the beginning, like I think everybody else, focused only on the students and the work in the class that was of the highest and best level. And also because I was in the middle of doing work, certainly I was very interested in the transmission of knowledge of what I was in the middle of exploring or experimenting with, and how that material was going to be transmitted to students. I very quickly realized that after the first year or two that I had this great top end of the class, and then there was kind of like everybody else, and that maybe a shift in the method or how I was thinking about teaching architecture as opposed to doing it needed to be figured out. And I started to think that maybe that they were, although it was the same activity, it wasn't the same activity in many ways, that there was a difference between what I was doing in my studio before I went to teach and what I was framing as an experience for students and hoping to get them to know. I was also not interested in having students copy my work, so I was trying to figure out a way also to tap into what they were interested in. And I think one of the things that I always felt very pleased about in teaching was that the work that came out of the studio really was the work that the students were interested in. There's of course a big penalty in that. At the end of the day, you know, it's a lot to relinquish the things you're interested in. It's kind of like having kids, you know, you have to sit there and actually talk to them about what they're interested in. But the payoff was very big. And actually, very recently, it was brought home to me because my daughter, who's 14, I studied drums when I was very young. It's actually one of the ways I learned how to do something creative was I was in music. And I had a great percussion teacher. It was a man named Sam Milano. He's actually still alive. He's in his, I think he's about 88 or 89 years old. And he's still teaching. And my daughter is taking percussion in school, and they suggested, well, maybe she should get some lessons. And I thought, well, this could be kind of amazing. Let me call Sam and see if he doesn't teach kids, but he made an exception. And so I'm sitting in the back of the studio, and it was like a flood of hearing him explain to her the difference between technique and the idea of being musical. Work done through feeling as opposed to work done through technique. And I realized it was like a switch that went off, and it was a click of something I had learned a long time ago and had obviously filed away, that the work that I had been doing as an architect was really coming out of intuition. It was coming out of, hopefully out of feeling. It was coming out of an integration of a whole array of things that I was and have been interested in, which I'd like to share with you and show you tonight. I think the premise was founded by Socrates a long time ago. Knowledge is what one brings into the world. Learning is the process of remembering it. Bringing it to the foreground in that we all already possess it was a very interesting insight, not only for myself, but how I attempted to transmit this to students. I've been working for a long time and have actually been trying to transform where I started in school with an idea that we're at I think, a very interesting crossroads. Maybe I think a different crossroads than a lot of what appears to be going on. I could be getting old, I don't know. But I'm a little concerned because it appears that there's been an inexplicable break between the rest of the continuum of architecture and its history to where we find ourselves now. And it's I think, coming out in ways that are about the environment and green architecture, but I think it's also in the way we make cities and the way we make environments in general. And I started to rethink, especially through curatorial work, as I went back and looked at, we've done exhibitions on Frank Lloyd Wright and Carlos Scarpa and an array of architects. When you go back and look at their work, you can see that as the century progressed, things shifted rather dramatically. And I came to understand, and was a theme of one of the essays I wrote, that there were really two histories of modern architecture. There was a history which was basically a history of new architecture which was seen in contraposition to its environment. If the environment is black and stone, we'll make it glass. If it's red, we'll make it green. If it's white, we'll make it black. If it's black, we'll make it white. There was, and some of it was predicated, or a fair amount of it was predicated on a whole array of hygienic ideas at the turn of the century. But there was also another group of architects who I think followed a very different trajectory. It was a less popular one. The other one, I think, was really dominated by Mies van der Rohe for most of the early through the mid part of the 20th century. The other was a different lineage. Really starts with H.H. Richardson, Louis Sullivan, Frank Lloyd Wright, Louis Kahn, Alvar Aalto, and probably finishes up with Carlos Scarpa. And it was a very different idea about building in the environment and building in cities. And although the work was new and certainly was inventive, it also was able to ameliorate itself back into the environment and was able to find a kind of comfort zone between the history of those environments and the buildings that ultimately were built into them. Now, having said all this, of course, I'm reminded about David Hockney, maybe we can get the other projector on, whose paintings I like very much, who always had said it's very good advice to believe only what an artist does rather than what he says about his work. After an artist has done the work, it's reasonably easy to theorize about it, but to theorize about it beforehand could be disastrous, and I don't think one should do it even if one has the inclination. So a lot of this is kind of meanderings after the fact and not, hopefully not done beforehand, but it's really been reacting to an array of situations that have changed for me over the time that I started. These two images represent two things that are very dear to me and have been. One, as Ming so graciously suggested, drawing, which I love to do and passionately love to do, and the other is construction. Those two things, to me, really frame my sense of being an architect. The ability to graphically explore and represent things in a studio setting, but never really separate from the idea that they're things made by other people, and they're things that are fabricated by artisans, by craftspeople, and that the intimate exchange between those two, in that dialogue between the person fabricating the object and the information they give you about the design process, about how you're thinking about a material, about the way you're thinking of assembly something, is an incredible instrument, an incredible learning process. This is one of the first projects I did on my own as an architect. It was a store on Lexington Avenue. That's Vinny and Umberto, those two guys, two ironworkers from Naples. And when I was designing this store, it was made in a shop. It was not built on site. It was done in large segments, and it was a tremendous learning curve. This was all made in welded steel. Was not a material that people used at the time I did it. And I started to become very interested in the tolerances and the thinness and thickness of things. I started to also already begin to question the ideas of what had been given to me as of what was modern, the disconnection from the existing city, the dislike. I was also working in a city that I loved dearly. It was a great place, which had great buildings.